December 8, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The smoke is still rising. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands in the operations room of the battleship Nagato, anchored in Hiroshima Bay. Around him, staff officers are celebrating. They're reading the damage reports like children unwrapping gifts. 4 battleships sunk, 4 more crippled. The American Pacific Fleet, the steel wall that was supposed to keep Japan bottled up, is burning in shallow water halfway across the ocean. One officer raises his sake cup. Another pounds the table. Yamamoto does not smile. He's staring at a map of the United States. Not the Pacific, not the carriers that escaped Pearl Harbor, the continental United States, the heartland, the factories, the steel mills of Pittsburgh, the shipyards of Newport News, the assembly lines of Detroit. He's done the math, and the math terrifies him. Yamamoto spent years in America. He studied at Harvard. He traveled from coast to coast. He saw the oil fields of Texas, the wheat fields of Kansas, the ore trains snaking through the Rockies. He stood in a Ford factory in 1925 and watched a car roll off the line. Every 10 seconds, he knows what America can do when it's angry. But Tokyo doesn't want to hear it. In the weeks after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese High Command is drunk on victory. They've taken the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore. The impregnable British fortress fell in 7 days. The Western powers are collapsing like dominoes. The Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere is no longer a dream. It's a reality unfolding faster than anyone dared hope. And America? America is reeling. At least, that's the story in Tokyo. The Imperial General Headquarters reviews intelligence reports with the confidence of men who've already won. American industrial production, overrated. The U.S. economy is soft, built on luxury goods and consumer trinkets. It'll take them years to retool for war. Maybe a decade to replace the ships lost at Pearl Harbor. By then, Japan will control half the Pacific. The Americans will sue for peace. They'll accept Japan's sphere of influence. They'll go back to their jazz clubs and their Hollywood movies. And leave Asia to the Asians. That's the plan. One senior staff officer puts it plainly. The Americans are a nation of shopkeepers and salesmen. They have no stomach for a long war. Another agrees. They've never faced the opponent like us. When the body bags start coming home, their democracy will force them to negotiate. Yamamoto listens in silence. He drafts a letter to a colleague. It will become one of the most famous and most ignored warnings in military history. I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. But the letter is filed away. The celebrations continue, and across the Pacific, in a country still numb from shock, something is already beginning to stir. January 1942. Washington, D.C. President Franklin Roosevelt sits in the Oval Office, surrounded by production, charts and shipping manifests. The numbers are grim. The U.S. Navy has 8 aircraft carriers. Japan has 10. America's battleship fleet is crippled. The merchant marine is hemorrhaging tonnage to German U-boats. Roosevelt lights a cigarette. He studies the projections. Then he picks up a pen and starts rewriting them. He crosses out the Navy's shipbuilding targets, doubles them, triples them. He scrawls notes in the margins: more steel, more aluminum, more rubber. He doesn't ask if it's possible. He decides it will be. On January 6, 1942, Roosevelt delivers his State of the Union address to Congress. The speech is broadcast live across the nation. Families gather around radios in living rooms, from Maine to California. Roosevelt's voice crackles through the static. We must outproduce the enemy. We must outbuild him. We must overwhelm him with the sheer weight of American industry. Then he lays out the targets: 60,000 aircraft in 1942, 125,000 in 1943, 5,000 tanks in 1942, 75,000 in 1943. And ships: 8 million tons of new shipping in 1942, 10 million in 1943. The numbers are so large they sound like fantasy. In Tokyo, Japanese intelligence officers read the translated speech and laugh. It's propaganda, they say. Impossible. No nation can produce at that scale. Roosevelt is bluffing, trying to rally a broken country. They file the speech away. But in Pittsburgh, the blast furnaces are already roaring back to life. In Bethlehem, the first steel plates are being cut for a new class of destroyer. And in a place called Willow Run outside Detroit, Ford Motor Company is about to build the largest factory in the world under a single roof. The giant isn't just waking up, it's rolling up its sleeves. March 1942. Kaiser Shipyard, Richmond, California. Henry J. Kaiser is a problem, at least that's what the Navy thinks. Kaiser is a civilian, a damn builder. He's never built a ship in his life. He doesn't know a bulkhead from a bollard, and now he's standing in front of the Navy's Bureau of Ships, proposing to mass-produce cargo vessels the way Ford mass-produces cars. The Admirals are polite, but their eyes say, "Get out." Traditional shipbuilding is an art. It takes skilled craftsmen months sometimes, years to lay a keel, frame a hull, rivet the plates. Each ship is practically custom-made. The idea of an assembly line? Absurd. Kaiser doesn't care what they think. He buys a mudflat on the San Francisco Bay. He builds 7 shipways. He hires workers who've never seen the ocean, farmhands, housewives, retirees. He breaks the ship down into prefabricated sections: bow, stern, midship superstructure. Each section is welded together on land, then lifted by crane and assembled like Lego blocks. It's ugly. It's unconventional. And it's fast. On September 27, 1942, Kaiser's yard launches the SS Robert E. Peary, a 10,500-ton Liberty ship in 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes, from keel to launch. 4 days, the Navy stops, laughing. By the end of 1942, 18 major shipyards are operating across the United States. They're building destroyers, cruisers, tankers, troop transports, and landing craft. But the backbone of the effort is the Liberty ship, the ugly ducklings that will carry the war on their backs. The design is simple: boxy, slow, maximum speed, 11 knots. A cruiser can outrun it, a submarine can catch it, but they're cheap, and they can be built by the thousands. At the peak of production, Liberty ships are being launched faster than they can be named. Workers finish one hull and immediately start another. Women are welding, teenagers are riveting. The shipyards run 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The sound is deafening. Pneumatic hammers, cranes groaning, steel plates, shrieking as they're sheared. Sparks rain down like fireworks. A welder named Mary Cruz works the night shift at Oregon Shipbuilding. She's 19 years old. Her husband is in North Africa with Patton's Army. She wears a leather apron and a bandana to keep the sparks out of her hair. She welds 30 feet of seam a night. Perfect beads, no gaps. She'll help build 47 ships before the war ends. She is one of millions. Across the country, the economy is transforming at a speed history has never seen. Automobile factories stop making cars. Overnight, they're producing tanks, jeeps, aircraft engines. General Motors becomes the largest military contractor on Earth. Chrysler builds the arsenal that will arm Patton's Third Army. A Chevrolet plant in Flint, Michigan, that once made sedans is now stamping out anti-aircraft guns. A Cadillac factory is machining turrets for M5 Stuart tanks. Ford's Willow Run plant, a single building covering 3.5 million square feet, is producing B-24 Liberator bombers. At its peak, the line spits out one 4-engine bomber every 63 minutes, 1 an hour. The Japanese high command still doesn't believe the numbers. They're convinced the reports are exaggerated, inflated for propaganda. Surely the Americans are counting prototypes, paper projects, half-finished hulls. But the intelligence is accurate, and it's about to get worse. April 1943. The Pacific Theater. Rear Admiral Matome Ugaki, Chief of Staff of the Combined Fleet, reviews the monthly reconnaissance reports in his cabin aboard the battleship Yamato. He's reading the American ship counts. Last month, 14 escort carriers in the Pacific. This month, 22. He blinks. He checks the report again. 8 new carriers in 1 month. It's impossible. It has to be an error. But the photographic reconnaissance confirms it. The Americans are launching a new class of small carrier, the Casablanca class, at a pace that defies logic. They're built on merchant hulls, crude and slow, but each one carries 28 aircraft. And they're everywhere. Ugaki picks up his pen. He writes in his diary, "The enemy is producing ships faster than we can sink them. If this continues, the war is lost." He closes the diary. He does not share this entry with his superiors. Back in Tokyo, the mood is still optimistic. Yes, American production is increasing, but Japan has the advantage of interior lines, shorter supply routes, battle-hardened pilots, superior torpedoes. The Americans are still learning, and besides, steel is just steel. It doesn't win wars, men. Win wars, that's what they tell themselves. But in the shipyards of Philadelphia, Seattle, and Mobile, the welders don't care about Bushido. They don't care about honor or sacrifice or the warrior spirit. They care about rivets per shift. Tons of steel moved, hulls completed. They are building a tidal wave, and it's about to crash across the Pacific. June 1944. Philippine Sea. The Japanese fleet is dying, not slowly, not with honor, not in a climactic, even battle between equals. It's dying the way a wolf dies when it stumbles into a threshing machine. Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa commands the mobile fleet from the carrier Taiho, Japan's newest, largest, most advanced flat top. Armored flight deck, pressurized hangar. She's supposed to be unsinkable. Ozawa has 9 carriers. He's planned this operation for months. It's Japan's chance to lure the American fleet into a decisive battle and destroy it with superior aircraft range and veteran pilots. The plan is brilliant on paper, but the paper is 2 years out of date. The Americans are waiting. Task Force 58. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commanding has 15 carriers, not the lumbering pre-war giants, new ships, fast carriers, Essex class and Independence class. They were launched in the past 18 months, some of them commissioned less than 90 days ago. Behind them, another wave is already under construction. Mitcher's fleet doesn't just outnumber Ozawa, it outradars him, outranges him, outfuels him. American carriers are supported by fleet oilers that can refuel ships at sea, enabling them to operate for weeks without touching land. Japanese carriers have to retreat to base to refuel, and the pilots, oh God, the pilots. Ozawa's aircrew are green. Most of them have less than 100 flight hours. Japan's veteran aviators, the men who struck Pearl Harbor, who sank HMS Prince of Wales, who terrorized the Indian Ocean, are gone. Dead at Midway, dead at Guadalcanal, dead in 100 grinding, unequal battles across the Solomons. Japan doesn't have time to train replacements. Fuel is short, carriers are needed at the front, so they send boys with barely enough experience to land on a carrier deck in calm seas. Mitcher's pilots have 400 hours of flight time. Some have 600. They've practiced against live targets towed across the Nevada desert. They've done night carrier landings until they can do it in their sleep. They are a different species of warrior. June 19, 1944, 10:01 a.m. The Japanese strike launches, 69 aircraft. Zeros and Judys and Jills, the best planes Japan can still produce. They never reach the American fleet. American radar picks them up at 150 miles. Fighters are scrambled. 45 Hellcats intercept the first wave while it's still climbing for a altitude. What follows is not a dogfight, it's a slaughter. The Japanese planes are slow. Their radios don't work. Their formations break apart under the first pass. The Hellcats faster, heavier, more powerful, tear through them like wolves through a flock of sparrows. One American pilot, Lieutenant J.G. Alex Vresiu, shoots down 6 Japanese planes in 8 minutes. 6. He lands back on the carrier Lexington, holds up 6 fingers to the deck crew, and grins. The deck erupts in cheers. Wave after wave, the Japanese keep coming, and wave after wave, they're annihilated. By the end of the day, Ozawa has launched 373 aircraft, only 130 return. The Americans lose 29 planes. Most of the pilots are rescued. American sailors start calling it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. They're joking, laughing. Some of them feel bad about it. It's not sporting, not a fair fight, but wars aren't fair, and this one is being decided in the shipyards of America, not the skies over the Philippine Sea. June 20th, 1944. Late afternoon, the Taiho is gone, sunk by a single torpedo from the submarine USS Albacore. A freak hit one torpedo, a fuel leak, a spark. The pride of the Japanese fleet blew herself apart from the inside. The carrier Shokaku, a veteran of Pearl Harbor, is also gone. 3 torpedoes from USS Kavala at Ozawa transfers his flag to a cruiser. He's lost 2/3 of his air groups. He has no way to strike back. He orders a retreat, but the Americans aren't done. Mitcher launches a late afternoon strike, 216 aircraft. It's a gamble. The sun is setting. His pilots will have to return in the dark, and night carrier landings are the most dangerous evolution in naval aviation. But Mitcher wants blood. The American strike finds the retreating Japanese fleet at 6:40 p.m. They sink the carrier Hio. They cripple 2 oilers. They damage 4 more ships. Then they turn for home. By the time they reach the American fleet, it's pitch black. Fuel gauges are reading empty. Pilots are exhausted, disoriented, desperate. Mitcher makes a decision that will define his career. He orders every ship in the task force to turn on their lights, searchlights, masthead lights, truck lights on the flight decks. The entire fleet lights up like a city, a beacon in the middle of the ocean, visible for 100 miles. It's a risk. Japanese submarines could be anywhere, but Mitcher doesn't care. He's not losing his boys. 80. Planes land safely. Some crash, some ditch in the water, but most of the pilots are saved, and across the fleet, sailors understand. This is what American industry has bought them, the ability to take risks, to waste ammunition, to turn on the lights and dare the enemy to come, because there are more ships coming, more planes coming, more of everything coming. In Tokyo, Admiral Ozawa's report lands on a desk in the Navy Ministry like a death sentence. 3. Carriers lost, 395 aircraft destroyed, hundreds of pilots dead, and the Americans barely scratched. One staff officer reads the report in silence. He sets it down. He stares at the wall. "We can't replace this," he whispers. No one argues. August 19, 44. Kure Naval Arsenal, Japan. The shipyard is quieter than it should be. Captain Tamechi Hara walks the docks at dawn, his boots echoing on concrete still scarred by American bombs. He's a destroyer captain, one of the best Japan has, and he's here to inspect his new command, except there is no new command. The slipways are half empty. The destroyer that was supposed to be ready for commissioning is still a skeleton of frames and unfinished plating. Workers move slowly, like men underwater. There's no urgency, no hammering chorus of a functioning shipyard. Hara asks a foreman, when the ship will be ready. The man looks away. "We don't have the steel, Captain. It's being diverted. We don't have the rivets, the welding rods, the copper for the wiring." Hara nods slowly. He doesn't ask where the materials went. He already knows. They went to keep the lights on in Osaka, to build locomotives, to patch the holes in factories bombed by B-29s. Japan's industrial base is being cannibalized to survive the present, with nothing left to build the future. He looks out at the harbor. A single destroyer sits at anchor, waiting for fuel that may never come. Across the Pacific, the Americans are launching a new destroyer every 72 hours. Hara doesn't say it aloud, but the thought is inescapable. We've already lost. The math is brutal, undeniable. In 1941, Japan's entire steel production was 6.8 million tons. In 1943, the United States produced 80.6 million tons. Japan is stripping railroads to build warships. America is building railroads and warships and still has steel left over. At the peak of the war, American factories are producing 1 aircraft carrier every 2 months, 1 destroyer every week, 1 Liberty ship every day, 1 bomber every hour 1. Tank every 20 minutes. The numbers stop sounding like production figures. They start sounding like natural disasters. And it's not just quantity. American ships are better. The new Essex-class carriers are faster, tougher, and more lethal than anything Japan has afloat. They carry more planes. Their radar can spot incoming. Aircraft at 100 miles. Their damage control teams can contain fires, seal breaches, and keep fighting through hits that would sink a Japanese ship outright. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the carrier USS Bunker Hill took a kamikaze hit that killed 400 men and set the flight deck ablaze. She was back in action 90 minutes later. Japanese carriers didn't come back from hits like that. They sank. October 1944. Leyte Gulf, Philippines, Admiral Takeo Kurita commands the center force, the last great surface fleet Japan can muster. 4 battleships, including the Yamato and Musashi, the 2 largest battleships ever built. 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers. It's a suicide mission, and everyone knows it. The goal? Break through the American landing zones at Leyte and destroy the invasion fleet. Even if the entire force is lost, it might buy Japan time. It might force the Americans to pause, to reconsider. It might change the arithmetic. On October 24th, as the center force transits the Sibuyan Sea, American carrier planes find them. The strikes come in waves. Helldivers, Avengers, Hellcats, 250 aircraft, the Musashi 73,000 tons of steel, the most powerful battleship in the world, is hit by 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. 19. She takes 8 hours to die. Her hull is so thick, so heavily armored, that it takes the combined weight of an entire afternoon's airstrikes to send her down. But down she goes. Kurita presses on. October 25th. Dawn. Kurita's battered force emerges off the coast of Samar Island, expecting to find troop transports and cargo ships. Instead, they find Taffy. Taffy 3 is a collection of 6 escort carriers, the small, cheap, slow flat-tops built on cargo hulls. Jeep carriers, the sailors call them, thin-skinned, vulnerable, escorted by 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts. They are hopelessly outmatched. Kurita has battleships with 18-inch guns. Taffy 3's destroyers have 5-inch guns. It's like bringing a pistol to an artillery duel, but Commander Ernest E. Evans, captain of the destroyer USS Johnston, doesn't run. He attacks. Johnston charges directly at the Japanese battleships, alone, laying smoke and firing her tiny guns at armored giants. She closes Toten 1,000 yards point-blank range for a naval engagement and launches a full spread of torpedoes. One hits the cruiser Kumano, blowing off her bow. The Japanese fleet reacts in confusion. They're not used to this. Destroyers don't charge battleships. Escorts don't pick fights with cruisers, but American ships do, because there are more where they came from. The battle lasts 2.5 hours. Taffy 3 loses 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, and a destroyer escort. Over 1,000 men die, but they hold. They throw everything they have at the Japanese torpedoes, bombs, shells, bluff, desperation. Planes from the escort carriers drop depth charges because they've run out of torpedoes. Pilots make dry runs, pretending to attack just to force the Japanese ships to maneuver, and incredibly, impossibly, Kurita blinks. At 9:20 a.m., convinced he's facing a much larger force, certain that American fast carriers are closing in, Kurita orders a retreat. He turns his battleships around and sails away. When the smoke clears, the men of Taffy. The 3 can't believe they're alive. Survivors cling to wreckage in the oil-slicked water. Some are in the sea for 2 days before rescue ships find them. On the escort carrier Fanshawe Bay, a sailor stares at the retreating Japanese ships and mutters, "They had us? Why'd they leave?" A chief petty officer shakes his head. They're out of time, out of fuel, out of ships. He lights a cigarette with shaking hands. We've got 50 more carriers. They've got, what, 5? 6? The sailor doesn't answer. The math speaks for itself. November 1944. Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. The staff meeting is subdued. Admiral Suemu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, reviews the losses at Leyte Gulf. 3 battleships, 4 carriers, 10 cruisers, 11 destroyers, gone. One officer asks the question no one wants to answer. How do we replace this? Silence. Toyota doesn't sugarcoat it. We don't. He pulls out a folder. Inside are reconnaissance. Photographs of American shipyards. Rows and rows of hulls under construction. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, they stretch to the horizon. The Americans, Toyota says slowly, are now launching more tonnage in a single month than our entire Navy possessed in 1941. He closes the folder. We are not losing this war in battle. We are losing it in the factories, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. The room stays silent, because everyone knows he's right. January 1945. USS Essex, off the coast of Luzon. Ensign Donald Gordon stands on the flight deck, watching the horizon. He's 22 years old. He's been in the Navy for 11 months. 6 months ago, he was a college student in Ohio. Now he's a fighter pilot on a fleet carrier in the middle of a shooting war. And he's bored. Not because there's no action. The task force has been launching strikes against Japanese airfields for a week straight. He's flown 9 sorties. He hasn't seen a single enemy plane in the air. They're all on the ground, burning, destroyed before they can take off. Gordon leans against a Hellcat and watches another strike launch. 30 planes, 40. The deck crew moves with choreographed precision. Plane after plane roars down the flight deck and climbs into the gray morning sky. A veteran pilot, a man with 2 years in the Pacific, walks past and catches Gordon's expression. "Look disappointed, Ensign." Gordon shrugs. "I thought there'd be more fighting," the veteran laughs. "It's not a happy sound." "Kid, the fighting's over. This is just cleanup." He nods toward the horizon, where columns of smoke rise from Japanese-held islands. "We're not fighting the Japanese Navy anymore. We're erasing it." He's right. By early 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy effectively no longer exists as a fighting force. Most of Japan's carriers are sunk. The survivors have no planes, no fuel, no trained pilots. The battleship Yamato, the symbol of Japanese naval power, is hiding in port, too valuable to risk, too expensive to fuel. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has become the largest armada in human history. 28 fleet carriers, 71 escort carriers, 23 battleships, 72 cruisers. Over 300 destroyers. The Pacific Ocean isn't contested anymore. It's an American lake. Task Force 38 and Task Force 58 roam at will, launching strikes against Japan itself. Airfields, factories, ports, rail yards, nothing is safe. Japanese ships can't leave harbor without being spotted by American submarines or patrol planes. Convoys are slaughtered before they reach their destinations. Japan's empire is starving. Oil from the Dutch East Indies can't reach the home islands. Rubber, tin, rice, all the resources Japan went to war for, sit uselessly in occupied territories, unreachable across seas, dominated by American steel. February 1945. Yokosuka Naval Base, Japan. Lieutenant Commander Toshio Nakano walks through the base, past ships that will never sail again. He's an engineering officer tasked with a grim assignment, salvaging parts from damaged ships to keep the few remaining vessels operational. It's a humiliating task. Japan's Navy once prided itself on craftsmanship, on honor, on the warrior's code. Now they're stripping destroyers for spare parts like junkyard scavengers. Nakano stops in front of the cruiser Aoba, listing in her berth, her superstructure, a twisted wreck from an air attack. Workers are cutting away sections of her hull with torches. A young sailor approaches, salutes. "Sir, we've removed the fire control equipment. It's being transported to Oyoto." Nakano nods. He doesn't mention that Oyoto herself is barely functional, or that there's no fuel to send her to sea. He looks across the harbor. A year ago, this base was crowded with warships. Now there are only wrecks and ghosts. How many ships does America have now? The young sailor asks. Nakano hesitates. He's seen the intelligence reports, he knows the numbers, but saying them aloud feels like treason, like admitting defeat. "More than we can count," he says finally. The sailor's face falls. Nakano turns away. He doesn't add the rest. "More than we can sink, more than we can even see, before they overwhelm us." March 1945. Kaiser Shipyard, Richmond, California. The yard is operating at a pace that seems physically impossible. Henry Kaiser's original goal was to build a Liberty ship in 6 months, then 3 months, then 1 month. Now they're launching one every 72 hours. The hulls slide into the water so frequently that the launching ceremonies have become routine. No champagne, no speeches. A few workers pause to watch the ship hit the water, then they turn back to the next hull already taking shape on the slipway. A reporter from Life magazine tours the yard, notebook in hand. He's trying to capture the scale of it, the sheer impossibility of what he's seeing. He interviews a crane operator named Louise Miller. She's 53 years old. Before the war, she was a school teacher. "Do you ever think about where these ships go?" he asks. Louise doesn't look down from her crane. Philippines? Okinawa? Wherever they're needed. Does it feel strange, building something so fast? She considers this. No stranger than the fact that we have to. She maneuvers a tenton section of hull into place, smooth as silk, and locks it down. "The boys over there need ships," she says. "So we build ships. It's that simple. Multiply Louise by millions. Welders, riveters, electricians, painters, sailors, soldiers, farmhands turned factory workers. And you get the American war economy, not heroic, not dramatic, just relentless." April 1945. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C., Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, sits in a conference room surrounded by maps and production charts. He's briefing a delegation of British officers on the upcoming invasion of Japan. One of the British admirals studies the charts, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're planning to deploy how many carriers?" King doesn't smile. 42 fleet and light carriers. Another 60 escort carriers for support operations. Good God. By July, King continues, we'll have over 100 destroyers attached to the invasion force, 24 battleships, 50 cruisers. The British admiral does the math in his head. That's more tonnage than the entire Royal Navy. Yes, and you're still building. Yes. There's a pause. The British officer sets down his pen. The Japanese must know they can't win. King looks up. His expression is cold. They've known that since 1942. They're just too proud to admit it. But pride doesn't float, and steel does. By the spring of 1945, American shipyards have produced 141 aircraft carriers, fleet, light, and escort, 952 destroyers and destroyer escorts, 203 submarines, 2,710, Liberty ships 414, Victory ships Japan, in the same period, managed to complete 17. Carriers, most sunk before they saw combat, 63 destroyers, 126 submarines. It's not a contest. It's not even a race. It's an industrial execution. May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders. The European war is over. And now the full weight of American industry pivots toward Japan, factories that were building tanks for the European theater retool for the Pacific. Shipyards double down. Production quotas are revised upward again. There's talk of building 100 more carriers, 1,000 more landing craft. In Tokyo, the leadership knows what's coming. A steel tidal wave, a force so massive that no amount of courage, no kamikaze sacrifice, no final banzai charge can stop it. Japan's admirals dismissed American industry as soft, slow, incapable of sustaining a long war. They were wrong, and now the Pacific is drowning in American steel. July 1945. Battleship Yamato's former berth, Kure Naval Base. The berth is empty. Yamato, the largest, most powerful battleship ever built, is gone. Sunk 3 months ago on a one-way suicide mission to Okinawa. No air cover, barely enough fuel for a one-way trip. She was attacked by nearly 400 American aircraft and went down after taking at least 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs. The pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy died the way everything else had died. Overwhelmed, outnumbered, drowned. In steel, Captain Atsushi Oi, a staff officer who once served aboard her, stands at the empty dock. He's writing a report that will never be officially filed. A private reckoning. "We built Yamato to be unsinkable," he writes. "We believed superior design and warrior spirit could overcome material disadvantage. We were fools." He pauses, staring at the water. The Americans did not build one Yamato. They built 1,000 ships we could not match. They did not win with honor. They won with mathematics. He folds the paper and slips it into his jacket. Some truths are too bitter to speak aloud. Across Japan, the denial is crumbling. Even the propaganda can't hide it anymore. American bombers darken the skies over Tokyo. B-29s fly in formations so large they look like clouds. They drop incendiaries, high explosives, leaflets warning of the next target, and the Navy, the institution that was supposed to protect the home islands, is powerless to stop them. There are no carriers left to launch interceptors, no fuel for the planes that remain. Pilots train in gliders because there's no gasoline to spare for actual flight training. Japan's last operational capital ships are hiding in the inland sea, camouflaged under nets, waiting for an invasion that may never come, because the Americans don't need to invade, they can just wait and starve Japan into submission. July 16, 1945. Aboard USS Missouri, off the coast of Japan, Admiral William Bull Halsey stands on the bridge of the battleship, watching the bombardment of the Japanese coast. 16-inch guns fire in sequence, their muzzle flashes lighting up the pre-dawn darkness. The shells arc through the sky and crash into industrial targets on shore, factories, railways, ports. Halsey has 15 battleships under his command. 15, Japan has 2 left that can still move, and they won't leave port. A staff officer approaches with the latest reconnaissance report. "Admiral, Japanese radar has stopped tracking us. They're not even trying to respond." Halsey grunts. They've got nothing left to respond with. He lights a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his weathered face. "You know what the difference is between us and them?" he says, to no one in particular. "They thought this war would be decided by warriors, by fighting spirit." He exhales smoke. "We knew it'd be decided by the guy running the factory, the welder, the crane operator, the kid." Turning out shell casings in Indiana, he flicks ash over the rail. "And we were right. The numbers tell the story better than any battle report." In 1941, Japan believed they could cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet and buy themselves a year, maybe 2, before America's industrial power became a factor. They were half right. Pearl Harbor did cripple the battleship fleet, but the carriers survived. And more importantly, the shipyard survived. By mid-1942, less than 7 months after Pearl Harbor, American shipyards had already replaced the tonnage lost at Pearl Harbor. By the end of 1942, they'd doubled it. By 1943, they'd quintupled it. Japan's entire naval production from 1941 to 1945, 648,000 tons. America's production in 1943 alone, 2.2 million tons, and that's just warships. That doesn't count the merchant fleet, the landing craft, the oilers and tenders and repair ships that allowed the U.S. Navy to operate 8,000 miles from home as if it were a coastal patrol. August 6, 1945. Hiroshima, the atomic bomb delivered by a B-29 superfortress named Enola Gay erases the city in an instant. 3 days later, Nagasaki. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito addresses the Japanese people by radio for the first time in history. His voice is thin, formal, almost otherworldly. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. It's the greatest understatement in military history. Japan surrenders, September 2nd, 1945, Tokyo Bay. The ceremony takes place aboard the USS Missouri, a battleship that didn't exist when the war started, built in a shipyard that had been a mudflat in 1940. Around her, the greatest armada ever assembled sits at anchor. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, hundreds of ships. The horizon is crowded with gray steel. General Douglas MacArthur presides over the surrender. Japanese officials sign the documents in silence, their faces masks of stoic grief. Above, 400 American aircraft fly overhead in formation, Hellcats, Corsairs, Avengers. A final demonstration of the power that broke Japan's back. One Japanese officer watching the aircraft pass turns to a colleague and whispers, "How did they build so many? The colleague has no answer, because the answer is something Japan never understood. America didn't win the Pacific War in a single brilliant stroke. There was no Cannae, no Austerlitz, no master plan that outsmarted the enemy. America won by building more ships than Japan could sink, more planes than Japan could shoot down, more tanks, trucks, jeeps, bullets, shells, and bombs than any military in history. They won with Liberty ships welded together by housewives in California, with destroyers built by farmhands in Alabama, with aircraft carriers launched from shipyards that didn't exist 3 years earlier. Japan's admirals dismissed American industry as weak, decadent, incapable of sacrifice. They learned the truth too late. American industry wasn't weak. It was sleeping, and once awakened, it buried Japan under an avalanche of steel so vast, so relentless, so utterly unstoppable that all the courage and honor and warrior spirit in the world couldn't stand against it. Decades later, historians would examine the war and search for the turning point. Midway, Guadalcanal, the Marianas. But the real turning point happened long before any of those battles. It happened in the shipyards, in the factories, in the cold, undramatic arithmetic of production schedules and steel tonnages. Japan gambled that America lacked the will to fight, a long war. They were wrong. America fought the war the only way it knew how, by working, by building, by turning the mockery of their enemies into the instrument of their destruction. The admirals in Tokyo dismissed American industry, and, for that miscalculation, the Pacific was flooded with steel.